I feel like none of this is new. My world, the chaos around me, what I've known to be true. We think we know, but do we? Tick tock of the clock, and I see hands go in all directions. Can't see your face, but I see worry in my own reflections. Something tells me you've seen this face before. Redemption waits for you, I'm sure. I see your eyes in the moon.
Hi there. Welcome to Impossible Conversations. I'm your host, Brandy.
I'm Sean. Welcome.
And we're delighted that you are joining us today. We have a really interesting show. I think they're all interesting, Sean. I think they're fascinating.
I would happen to agree with that.
That's why I do it. That's why we do it, I think, right? If it's not fun and interesting, exciting, why do it?
Absolutely.
So, how are you doing? How you doing, Sean?
Good. Can't complain. Yeah, keeping busy. You know, trying to get used to getting back to the world the way it was kind of beforehand.
There's not going to be a new normal, Sean. You know, new normal.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's ever getting back to the way it was before, and that
might
be a good
believe
thing.
it or not, it's back to a little more than I thought it was going to be. Thankfully,
Oh,
so I think that rhetoric is kind of slowed, but we'll see. You know,
we'll see.
Not gonna put it past them to try something else crazy, but we'll see.
But what a great opportunity to usher in something new, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to what we're talking about today: education versus indoctrination. And what a great title, right? I mean, it's something that a lot of us think about, but we don't speak too much about. So I want to welcome our guest. Her name is Zahra Lightway. And Zahra is an international speaker and thought leader in new models for education. Zahra is a designer and a founder of Lightway Schools. She's a holistic educator, and she has designed a program called E.P.I.C, Empowering Parents, Inspiring Children. It's a home education certification program. She's going to talk to us about her story and why she would be doing something like this. So welcome, Zahra. We're happy to have you today.
Thanks, Brandy. Thanks, Sean. It's great to be on the show. Yeah,
Great
I'm really excited. Yeah.
And where are you, Zahra? It looks dark outside.
Yeah, well, that light you see there is the dawn coming up. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm on the top of the South Island in New Zealand in a place called Golden Bay, which is beautiful. It's like, to get here, you have to go over this big hill that takes about 45 minutes at least. And you come in and it's like coming into a bubble. It's a whole different world in here.
How amazing.
It's been nice to forget there's another world out there for the last 2 years, I have to say.
I can imagine. Wow, I'm envious.
Yeah, New Zealand's on my bucket list to go see you and check things out over there. So tell us a little bit about your educational background. What made you start getting into education and now start doing this new thing?
Yeah, well, I was always quite excited by education. I remember even at 11 years old, I read this book, Little Men, you know, another book by Louisa M. Alcott, where she wrote also Little Women. And she had a school there, and I felt really excited even then about the idea of how school could be and how parenting could be and what relationships between adults and kids could actually look like. And then as time went by, you know, I moved to the US. At that time, I was living in the UK. I moved to the US as an adult and went to college. And then I started tutoring students in my classes, and I really enjoyed it. I got excited every time I saw a magazine about education and books about education. I would just read them. And then I started working in early childhood as I was putting myself through college. And I was also a single parent. So towards the end of my degree, which my bachelor's degree is actually in French language, which is just very useful, as you can imagine. But I had a passion for it, and that's what I wanted to do, you know. So towards the end of that, as a single parent, I thought, I really like this teaching and learning and this whole thing. And it would be really useful to have the same schedule as my son. I'll go give teaching a try. So I did. And the first job I had was at Westbury High School in Houston.
Mhm.
And it was trial by fire for sure. That whole first year, there was gang initiations in the hallway and things like that happening. Yeah, no, it was crazy. And I'd never been in an American high school before at all. And so by the end of the first year, though, I got the bug. I loved teaching. I loved everything about it. And I'd learned a lot. And so that continued. I was there for a couple of years. Then I moved to Pershing Middle School. I taught English there for about 3 years. And then went to Lanier Middle School and taught French there. So the French finally became useful. Taught French there for 3 years. And absolutely dream job, if you can imagine. All the kids were signing up because they wanted to take French. They wanted to learn it. They were bussed in from all over Houston because they were gifted and talented, which we can talk about that a bit later, maybe. That's a whole can of worms in itself. And the classroom was outside in nature. You could open the door, hear the birds. It was just a dream teaching job if you were going to teach in public education. And I loved it. Yeah.
Wow.
But then
I was going to say, so when did things go south? So what happened?
What happened was over time, every year teachers do professional development. And we learn all this incredible stuff, like even about gifted and talented, like how you're supposed to go about it, what that really means, that kids aren't necessarily gifted in everything, just in some things, and all these different practices and things that are actually quite responsive to young people and would show a great deal of care and all about individualizing what they're learning and so on. But then I guess as with many organizations or industries, in a way, you go back and then the reality of day-to-day business gets in the way. And there was always these ideas of what we could add and what we could add and what we could add and do this. And there was never anything taken away, though, to make space for anything new. Right? Mm-hmm. So there's actually a lot of knowledge and understanding in education circles and in universities and professors and teachers and things that would be really good for children if we could actually do them. But what I saw was the system itself was incapable of changing. The people within it kind of want some change, but it's like trying to build a new house on the site of an old house, but you don't knock the old house down first. It's just not possible, right? And that's what I was seeing. And so then I had this total spiritual calling to authenticity that said, you can't do this anymore. Like literally, my son was still in high school. And my calling was to just stop work. And I'm like, well, okay, and do what? And there was no answer to that. So it was this huge leap of faith to just step out and reevaluate life and reevaluate what I was doing and where I stood with everything. So I did that for about 2 years and then went back and got my master's degree in education and my principalship certification, and did a job actually then in Aldine School District, where I took on the role of International Baccalaureate Coordinator in a 4-school partnership. We were bringing in this program, and the journey was to get the 4-school partnership authorized by them. And that was the best example of trying to put the new house on top of the old house that I've ever come across. It was crazy. That district was testing the kids every 3 weeks and then doing that whole looking at the test scores by the objectives and going, okay, well, they missed that objective. Let's pull these 10 kids out and go and teach them that objective on this day. And they can just miss that other class and then bring them back and so on. And it was all about this disaggregation of data and that. And then on top of that, we were trying to put in a system that was very much holistic minded, more about asking good questions, researching for themselves, thinking for themselves, looking at the ingenuity of mankind and how we can apply that, looking at things through many different lenses and doing more project-based kinds of learning, which was brilliant. And I loved it, which is one of the reasons I took the job on. And yeah, we did get authorized, but by the skin of our teeth. And I'm not sure how authentic the program really was in the end. It was as authentic as it could possibly be in those circumstances, I would say. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned testing. I want to touch on testing just for a minute, because it's a big controversy here in the US that still that, and it's worse after the pandemic, because there's a lot happening with do we test, do we not test, now that some kids were online, some kids weren't. They've changed standards for certain things, and they've actually shifted the curriculum to where the kids are doing less and learning less. And I say that because I have a child in public school. He's not a child anymore. He's a teenager. He's like 14 now. But the testing is still an issue. I mean, what we do to these kids in public schools around tests, and teachers, because they have to endure grueling hours of testing, and they have to teach to these tests so that the children pass and they get good marks, because if they don't, the schools don't get the funding.
That's right.
They get rated.
Yes.
And I thought we did away with child labor. I mean, I thought that was over, because if the children have to work really hard to get good grades and good marks on these tests, they're not learning. They're just working to an end for money. Yeah.
Well, the problem I see with the testing and the way that this is all being done is that it treats teaching and learning like it's this pure science, like it's completely empirical. If you and I actually talked to the superintendent of schools in Colorado when I was living there about this. And he believed that if we just perfected that system enough, then we could stop up all the gaps, hence this, pull out this subjective and this subjective and this subjective, and you do that and then teach to that, and you'll have this little perfect models of children that are all on the same page, that can all do the same things at the same time. Wow. And they'll all have learned and they'll be on grade level and it'll be good. And we just need to keep pushing this until we get there. And here's the issue. That's not how human beings learn.
That's right.
It's just not how we learn. What we do, and we even learn this in education courses, and in psychology courses, human beings, the brain creates constructs of reality, right? Based on all of the incoming information. And as children are growing up, they build on these understandings and construct. Like they might start with the idea of a dog, and they learn dogs bark. Well, first they see the creature and it barks and they're told dog, 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 dog. And over time, that construct builds and builds and builds. There are many breeds of dogs. They look different. They have short hair. They have long hair. They sound different when they bark, and so on, right? Well, if you just tried to teach a tiny bit about dogs here and there, everywhere, with no construct really to put it in, what's going to happen? It goes in one ear and out the other, right? Because there's nowhere to put it and ground it. Whereas in the school I had in the Woodlands, the children had a lot of space and a lot of time to build those constructs up, to build those understandings. We did, for example, all about ancient Egypt, and the kids chose as a group what they wanted to learn about at that school. And in our ancient Egypt studies, we looked at the lives of people and the pharaohs and the scribes and the cities and what they were and how they all lived, Well, in the afternoon time, which was B time, which was, time to do what they wanted to do, that was completely unstructured, what did they do? They got every block in the room and they built a massive Egyptian city that covered the whole floor of the whole classroom.
Wow.
They labeled it with everything, even said scribes and things. And I remember this one child, Ian, came to said, Zahra, what kind of animals would they have had in ancient Egypt? And I'm like, Yeah, I don't know. Let's have a look. So he went and
Good
Googled it
question.
and got the accurate plastic animals to add to the whole big
Wow.
floor model and stuff. And what happens with that, you see, is when the children take the knowledge and the things that they're learning and they manipulate it with their hands, with their bodies, it becomes integrated, right? That's why they talk about kinesthetic learning. It's about using it, doing it, and that reinforces it, and that again creates that construct. You can bet to this day they're probably all in their 20s now, about 20 years old, that those kids have not forgotten what they learned about ancient Egypt, what they learned about space, what they learned about so many things that we did. And yeah, so that this other traditional system knows all of this but doesn't actually practice it. And yeah, you
Why do you
talk
think
about
that
child
is?
labor.
Zahra, why do you think that is?
Oh, why do I think that is? That would be pure conjecture, wouldn't it, on my part? Why are they doing that? I think it's possibly for the same reason a lot of the systems that we're using right now don't work. Is because the systems seem to serve themselves,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah.
Rather than the people within them, right?
Yes.
Because if systems serve the people within them, they would grow and evolve according to the needs of people. But it seems like we're always being asked to follow the policy because that's the policy the system has, whether it makes sense to do that right then or not. That's the rule, that's the policy, that's what we're doing. So I think with this testing thing, it's just become a behemoth. It's like a juggernaut, right? It's been implemented, it's been done, it's been invested in so much, and it's just rolling along, and it's out of control. It's like on a press. If I can't believe it here, it's still going as bad as it was when I left the States.
Is
now,
there
the other?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead with finish your thought because I do have a question about testing. Go ahead.
Okay. The other thing it could be, and call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, but it could be that the school system, actually, this isn't even a theory, this is actually fact, wasn't designed to bring forward true education, truly critical thinkers and expansive thinking, creative human beings. It was designed to create factory workers, right? So you start work at the sound of a bell, you stop work at the sound of the bell. Why do we have bells in school? Because if you stop the factory line every time someone wants to go pee or eat something or whatever, then you never get anything made. So you had to train people to do things all in segmented times, do it all at the same time, and obey the factory manager, which is of course the role played by the principal and teachers and all of that. So if you only need people to have basic skills and basic levels of understanding and not ask too many questions of their leaders, then you might want to have a system that dumbs them down, which you touched on. And we will come back to that. Yeah.
Yep.
So what's your question about testing?
She's definitely a conspiracy theorist. I like her.
You think?
I'm
But
just
you're
messing.
right. You're right, Zahra. I mean, this has been you don't have to have a degree in rocket science to understand how something has been constructed and to just go back in history. Who started these kinds of systems? Why did they start them? Like you said, if you want good workers, you grow good children, good children, right?
Exactly. I call it biorobots that all work in factories. I mean, it was deliberately designed for that. We learn about that in education courses. That's why I say this is not even a conspiracy theory at all. It's just it was a conspiracy on the part of industrial people, the industrialists, Rockefeller, Carnegie, those people, that wanted this workforce to enrich themselves through their labor. That's why, every time I see a school mission statement that says productive citizens, I cringe. It literally makes me nauseous. I'm like, no, I want expanded human beings and creative entrepreneurs and blah, blah. That's what I want to see coming out. People that are happy.
Amen to that. Excellent. Thank you, Zahra, for that thought. We have been a couple of shows ago, we had someone on talking about racelessness theory of racelessness. And we mentioned Dr. Lyle Asher, who has done a series. I recommend everybody go check this series out on YouTube called How Colleges Are Becoming Cults. And basically it talks about ed schools and the educational schools of what you're referring to that teach the teach the teachers how to teach children and what to teach them, and they've been infiltrated, so to speak. Or that could have been why they were designed in the first place, to teach them how to teach a certain way, to become indoctrinated, not to educate necessarily. So to your point, you're right. I mean, I think Dr. Asher would agree with you that this has been more from the beginning a conspiracy, but now it's been so pervasive, so widespread that it's getting into our society and our culture in a way that, as we've seen in the past 2 years, it's pervasive. It's everywhere. If you've been taught in public schools, then you know how to be a good little citizen. And in order to do that, you have to do these other things. So I think you're right. I think there's like this stair step to something much bigger. A question about the testing that I had. Do you think that evaluation does have a place in schools?
Yeah, well, there's two main kinds of assessment. There's formative assessment that actually allows for, it's kind of like more ongoing, right? It's ongoing. And that can be any kind of thing. It can just be feedback on, oh, tell me what you're doing with your project right now. Yeah. And you give feedback, right? So that's formative assessment and feedback. And then there's summative assessment, which is,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You cut out a little bit. What's it called?
Oh, yeah. Summative. And summative just means what you do at the end of something. You sum it up. You want to know if they've learned certain things. So I think there's a place for both of these. But the question is more, what are we using it for? And how are we doing it? Right? So assessment, in my view, needs to be done in a way that actually furthers the learning process rather than comes across as a judgment, and definitely we need to let go of this idea that all children are supposed to learn the exact same thing at the same time, based on literally the only thing it's based on is your date of birth, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're born by a certain time, then you should be learning all of this. Right. And that goes back to what I was saying about we learn all these things in education courses, but like that, kids are all individuals and they're all going to learn at their own pace and you have to individualize everything. But by the end of the year, they better pass that damn test and all be the same.
What a contradiction.
Or forget it.
Yeah.
What a contradiction.
It really is. It's just,
what?
Oh, that's maddening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, because what they really mean by individualized instruction is take them out and teach them the objectives that they missed.
Yeah, that's really what it is. Yeah. They're not on the right track to get to the end of that test perfectly. So pull them out and get them back on track. And that's it. Yeah, gosh.
Yeah.
But there's a better way, right, Zahra? I mean, what I love about what you're doing is you're showing parents and educators how to do it differently. That's what I really like about what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit more about your program and why and some of the things that make it unique and different?
Sure. Well, actually what I'm talking about and what I'm bringing forward has been going on for quite a long time, like over 100 years. And a big part of it, how would I even say, where will I go with this? It's such a huge topic, this is. So there's many different ways to do education and learning for youth and adults. You have your Steiner or Waldorf schools, you've got Montessori, you have democratic schools. There's a whole spectrum, right? Scale of learning possibilities, all the way from highly, highly prescriptive, which is what we see in traditional school, to completely open-ended, which is what you would see in a Sudbury school, where they don't even actually put anything in the space. When you start a Sudbury school, it's a blank slate and the kids come in and create everything, including to a large degree, the environment, buildings, that kind of stuff, right? And so you can have anything in between. And what I really think that I bring forward that is the unique part is that I actually support lots of different ways, depending on who your child is and what the circumstance is, right? Some children crave structure. Some crave complete freedom and do well with it. Most are kind of somewhere in the middle, right? They want to know where the boundaries are, where the lines are. They want to know when things are going to happen, especially when they're young, right? They like to have that at least routine. It doesn't necessarily have to happen exactly at 11 o'clock, but they like to know, oh yeah, after snack, we're going to go and do that, or we do this, and so on. So in my E.P.I.C program, what I do is I train parents in the concepts and ideas behind how to do a more open-ended education that balances the structure and the freedom. And then also give them like just some tools to do that with, right? To implement that in a way that works for them. So it's quite personalized. And I've been focusing mostly on parents and people that want to homeschool, because even before I left the States 7 years ago, the homeschool thing was just really exploding. It was starting to explode, and I could feel it coming, and I saw it, and I'm like, wow, okay, that's a place where people are going to need help. Because for me, the worst possible outcome for going to homeschool is that you make all that effort and do that, and then just set up a desk in your home and teach them a bought curriculum online, or just follow the school curriculum and still expect the same outcomes. And oh, they've got to learn math, and they've got to learn English, and they've got to learn all of this. What a lot of parents don't understand is that being tied to that curriculum is limiting their children in every area of their development. It's completely stopping them from achieving their full potential. You know, that system of a preset curriculum has no chance of bringing forward an ascended man, not necessarily ascended, that's not actually the word I'm looking for, an evolved human. I think that's maybe a better word, an evolved human, and helping us evolve.
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think that's a great answer to that question. And so are there some things that as parents and just, you know, uncles or aunts that we can do to start sparking a child's interest on how to think, how to be more expansive, how to critically think, right? What can we do, like little tidbit of like, what can we do to help them? Yeah.
Of course, a lot depends on how old they are. But in general, I think the biggest thing we can do with young people is talk to them. Talk to them like they are human beings, more so than this is a child. People tend to talk down to children. And of course, you have to simplify things for the age group, right? Based on where they're at in their development and how much of those constructs they have to put the knowledge into that you're sharing, right?
Yes.
But that's different to assuming they're not intelligent. I have this saying I love, which is children are not less intelligent than adults. They're merely less experienced, meaning they have less construct, right? They have less. Right. So we want to help them build those understandings of the world. And maybe that's the way to look at it, is how can I help my children build a bigger picture of the world? What can I expose them to? You know, I went to Chicago. This was in 2014, and helped a woman, Patty, and her blog and information is actually on the website. I helped her. She wanted to take her 2 kids out of school. They were like 10 and 12 or 11 and 13 right there. And her husband was in a lot of resistance about it because she wanted to do what we call unschooling, which is not having all that curriculum. So I went and did a couple of workshops for her, and she brought some friends in as well. And we talked about it all. And in the end, her friends weren't ready to let go of the old system. And this is an issue that we see a lot, is this parents need to let go of the old system so that they can have something new. And there's a lot of fear there for people. So Patty went ahead and did it anyway. And now her daughter, I mean, what a success story, hey? Her daughter is now just turning 18. She has a 2-year degree in horticulture. She's a professional harpist. They've done professional theatre. And she just got into Cornell University to go and study more and move forward more with horticulture. I mean, she had a 2-year degree at the age of 16.
Amazing. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah? And there was Dad worried, and he did go online and he did buy a curriculum, and he spent $1,500 on it. And his plan was that they would do that for 2 hours every day. And Mum just said, okay, sure. And they put them on the shelf and left them there. And she took them out into the world and she let them explore. They've both had jobs for years that they volunteer or get paid for that they love, and on a goat farm, and just going to Civil War reenactments, and all the things that they've done have just sparked that and allowed them to come forward. And her son was very depressed when I met them. Right? School was not working for him. And we especially see this with the young boys, with the boys. School does not work for so many of them. And now you see pictures. If you go on the website, really, just go read it. There's like 3 parts to the story, because I've reconnected with them over the years, getting these updates. And if you see the picture of him at the beginning and a picture of him now, and he's just like, you can see his confidence and you can see the growth there. And he's also got a 2-year degree, but I'm sorry, I don't remember what it's in.
It's okay. So your website is lightwayschools.org, right?
Yeah.
Have it up there on the screen. And this is the website you're referring to. And, you make such a great point about how schools, like their intention, I feel, is to, public schools we're talking about, their intention is to support the student and help them through troubled times, like through depression, anxiety. But at the end of the day, it's counterproductive, I find, right? Especially after what just happened, the response to the virus, schools shut, like everybody shut down. Everybody shut down. Let's continue, but let's do it online, where you're even more separated and isolated from each other, which I mean, I just didn't understand how that was supposed to be helpful and supportive. And in fact, it did have the opposite effect. We see depression on the rise, anxiety on the rise. But it sounds like what you're saying, part of the solution is to reconnect. One of the things I'm seeing in homeschooling too is these parent co-op type programs that are coming forth. You seem to have some knowledge about those too, where the groups kind of come together and create like a network or a unit or a system. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We actually have that quite strongly here in Golden Bay as well, is a network or co-op of homeschooling parents. And what we see within that is that the parents offer classes and things that they're passionate about, that they know about. They have days out where everybody gets together. It's the homeschool day out. They've been going to the beaches and sailing and doing all kinds of stuff. And what you see within that is that the children and youth actually start to find their own way, and they communicate really well what it is they want. And then the adults in the community can meet those needs and teach them what they need to learn. My big vision, what I would love to see, is taking that and bringing it back into our neighborhoods, and Houston inspired this in me. I was driving by a subdivision one day in Houston, and I suddenly just saw this image in my head of kids running around, of there being food growing everywhere instead of all these lawns, of we've got so much unused real estate within our subdivisions, right? All day long there's these empty houses, or there used to be. I don't know what it's like now, but there used to be, because people were at work and so on. Why can't we repurpose some of these spaces? Why can't you turn an empty room that's sitting there in your house all day into the art hub that all the kids within that subdivision who are part of this network would go to, right?
Yes.
And then have a science hub, and then a dance place. And then most subdivisions have like a pool with a clubhouse and stuff like that. Why couldn't we be using all of this stuff, right? And come back to tribe, to village. We need a village. It's not working.
Yes.
being so separate, you know. And I have to laugh because before this all started, and this whole incredibly insane response to all of this started, I remember actually sitting thinking, wow, if humanity is going through this experiment with separation and how separate we can be. Well, we went to the nuclear family. That was pretty separate. But then we went to the single parent family. And I thought, wow, that's as far as we can go into separation, isn't it? We can't go any further. Boy, was I wrong. I'm like,
oh yeah.
And then this happens. I went, okay, well, surely this is the final piece. We don't need to experiment with this anymore. We know the harm it does. We cannot be apart from each other. It doesn't work.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
mean, taking what you were saying about the whole village thing, I think that's a great point. I mean, I really do. I was involved in a music camp for several years that did exactly that, and it was probably one of the most fulfilling experiences I've had as a teacher. You know, as a music teacher, it was literally just 10, 15 different teachers that we all had. You know, we had a bunch of kids that we put into little bands, and it was basically a crash course for music. And every one of the teachers had a hand in getting these kids to play a show within 2 weeks at a large rock club on Long Island. And literally 2 weeks of a crash course. Some of these kids had never sung, had never played an instrument, nothing. And they would walk in, and 2 weeks later, they're on a stage in big lights, big sound system, and they're singing and playing in front of all their friends and family. And it took a village to get that done. You know, it's a 2-week crash course in you know, how to get on a stage and perform. And it was absolutely fantastic. And yeah, with the current structure and the way teaching is thought of in this country and many others, it just seems like that could never happen. Something like that, you know, and it's akin to the same thing you see in in a movie like School of Rock, where he was very, you know, unorthodox with his teaching. Yeah. And it's so funny when you were talking about this stuff. I approach my teaching the same way. Like when I teach a child about drumming, I don't teach them just like, oh well, here's a quarter note and this is what it looks like, and very simple things. I teach them, okay, where are we going with this? What are we going to end up with? We're going to end up with you behind a drum kit, hopefully playing with other people, you know, or you singing with a band or something. So I'll teach them all the things along the way with the basics, of course, you know, but I'll teach them the practicality of like, okay, what is this going to be in the end? Where are we going to end up? And how can I get them to that point while still getting them the basics and getting them to understand what's going on, but also give them practical solutions as to what you can expect later on, you know? And I think that farmhouse learning thing just fosters that where everybody's in the same room, you can see where it's going. You can see a person who's a kid who's 16, 17 years old and what they've learned and where, you know, how they act. And, you know, you're not just surrounded by people your own age, you know, and that's what School of Rock did too. They put bands together of kids with their own ages, but also with people who were mixed age, and it was just such a great experience. And I mean that changed the way I thought about teaching, you know. And I really think that farmhouse idea really needs to kind of get back into the you know, they should rattle it around a little bit, you know, in the collective brain of the, you know, the people who are just making these decisions for the schools, you know.
Yeah. You know, there's like 4 or 5 things that could touch on with what you've just said. You're spot on, you know. And then also relating to what Brandy was asking, why is it like this? I think a big part of it is that the people making the decisions are far too removed from the people their decisions affect. And, you know, they haven't even been in the classroom. They haven't been working with the children. They haven't been in the neighborhoods with the people to know what that community needs, you know?
Yeah. It's like Fauci. It's like Fauci never seeing a patient for.
Oh gosh, yeah, like I'm Dr. Fauci. You haven't seen a patient in how many years? You know, how long has it been since you practiced anything with regard to that? Yeah, it's crazy.
Very similar. Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, and then you said about you don't teach them quarter notes and start with that, you know. If you think about this, you know, and this is another massive problem with the way that we're teaching things, is it's all very linear and constructivist in the sense of you start with the smallest thing. Like in your case, if you start bombarding them with the quarter notes and this note and that note and da 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 da, and this, there's the music line and all of that right up front, with no context and not any real desire to learn it, which isn't a problem that you would have teaching music probably. But if you did that, they would never really learn music. And the same is with like reading, right? So a lot of parents are scared to let go of the old system and having this set curriculum because they're afraid they won't learn math and reading. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we sat babies down and taught them what's called phonemes, which is the smallest units of sound, right? A, I, O, that's all phonemes, and f and v and all and m.
Mm-hmm.
And then started teaching them how to fit those together to make words, and then started teaching them how those words make sentences. They'd all be needing a speech therapist because the brain doesn't learn that way, right? It just doesn't. How do we learn to speak? It's context, but it's also, I think of it as quantum, right?
Yes.
All these thousands of hours of conversation that babies are hearing start to create those neural pathways, those constructs, until eventually they have enough information and suddenly like, oh, language works like this. I'll say that. This refers to that. Da, 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 da. And then they're just learning, right?
Yes.
What do we do with reading? Oh, learn the alphabet. You want to know what to do for your kids? Don't teach them the bloody alphabet. Read to them. Read to them.
That's
right?
great.
Yeah.
That's
so you
great.
take the alphabet and then that makes words and then that's sentences and paragraphs and so on. And how many kids hate reading and have trouble reading?
That's true.
And yet in the democratic schools where nobody's forced to learn anything, they all choose when they learn things. Even if it takes a kid to be 11 years old before they choose to read, within 2 months, they read better than their counterparts in public traditional schools.
Wow.
Because they want to.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that
Right?
goes from for anything and being a human. You know, you can't force someone to do something that they don't want to do, and it never works. It just doesn't.
It doesn't.
No?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
No, right? Look at the outcomes. Would you say that all the kids that pass all these tests and do really well are highly educated, well-versed, ready for the world, young people, confident in themselves and able to live life? No, far from it.
I wasn't.
No,
I know that
I
for a
wasn't
fact.
either.
You know, and I wasn't
when
even in the public school. I was in Catholic school all my life, so and it's the same way because it's the
still
same curriculum.
traditional.
They're all
traditional.
they're all the same stuff.
It's all the same stuff.
Mhm.
When you talk to Patty, if you talk to Patty in Chicago, and all those friends of hers who left their kids in school, they all now look at her kids who are confident in themselves, well educated, great thinkers, happy, fulfilled, and they all regret leaving their kids in there because the fear that they had of letting go of that old one. A friend of mine once said, it's like those monkeys that they trap. They put the pot out and they've got nuts in the pot, and the monkey puts their hand in and grabs the nuts, but then can't get their hand up because they're too scared to let go of the nuts, so they get captured, right? It's like that. We have to let go of that old one before we're going to be able to figure out, really experience something new and see the benefits to the kids. Every young person I've met that has gone through these other types of systems is happier and better educated.
Yes.
And they're just, also there's a quality to their interactions with adults that's very, very, very different, because there's that. And that goes back to what I was saying about talk to them like human beings. They interact with adults as peers. And I don't mean that it's disrespectful or anything, far from it, but they're intellectually and emotionally equals. And why wouldn't we be? That doesn't mean that as parents and guides that we don't still have boundaries and things. In fact, it's an invitation to better boundary making and better boundaries, because we are holding them accountable because they are full-fledged human beings. Just because they're children doesn't mean they're not fully human beings, right? You don't become more human or more intelligent as you get older. You just get more experience. You just get more of those constructs built with which to navigate the world. Yes. So when we think about it like that, it's more of an approach, isn't it? And when we put that approach into the way that we teach and learn, then we see different results. You're only going to get the same results if we keep using the same system. And look at the state of the world with all these indoctrinated people.
Yep.
It's not great.
It's not. And I think this is, looking at all the people that have just kind of followed along with what they've been told these past couple of years is a testament to how effective our school systems
Mhm.
have been at indoctrinating people.
Mhm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
so what you're talking about, Zara, and a lot of people don't even know these things exist. They don't know how effective homeschool could be. They don't know how effective these alternative type school, we say alternative, but
Mhm.
as you said, they've been around for over 100 years.
Mhm.
And I think it's wonderful to be able to explore that now when people are saying, yeah,
Mhm.
that this public school system, it's not working for us. So we need to find a better way, in a different
Yeah.
way. This is
Yeah.
the light way, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah. It's a way that feels definitely a lot lighter, that's for sure.
I love
Yep.
it. I love it. Sean, do you
Yeah.
have any other questions for Zara? Do you want to add anything else before we go?
No, it's just great. It's great to hear, some of the things, and I'm just, of course, putting it to my own experience, and that those things kind of came across to me. Even in my college days, I lucked out and got a great teacher at college that was very into this kind of learning in some ways, where he
Mhm.
he always approached things from a practical standpoint. He would always say, "All right, well, here's what you're going to be facing when you get out of here, and what's the best way that you can make money or keep yourself afloat and do what you feel is good. This is what you're going to face in the real world." And he would just talk to me from that standpoint, and he never discouraged learning anything that wasn't really in the curriculum. It was more like, okay, learn everything you possibly can, and then you have much more choice by the time you get out of here to do what you actually want to do. And
Mhm.
I lucked out because he was involved in pop. He was involved. I went to school for music at Juilliard, so he was involved in pop. He was involved in classical. He was involved in jazz. I mean, you name someone, he's worked with them. Movie soundtracks, everything. So he had a wealth of vast wealth of knowledge and experience in everything you can imagine under the sun. And having him kind of approach it from that standpoint was absolutely invaluable to me. I mean, and I
Mhm.
hadn't had that before that. It was a little bit more, like you said, that kind of straight and narrow path of like, okay, this, you got to get to the test and you got to learn all the stuff you're supposed to learn.
Mhm.
That big picture approach to me is so important now when I teach my students. That's and even if they're 5 or 6 years old, I'm talking about gravity when I'm talking about their sticks coming up and down. I'm talking about like,
Mhm.
this is why it's harder to do things, up and down. And
Mhm.
I talk about all these different mechanics that are involved as if they're an adult. I don't talk to them like they're kids. I
Mhm.
talk to them like they're an adult. If they don't know about it, I'll be like, you're probably going to learn this at school at some point, and
Mhm.
look out for it. But this is what you're using when you do this.
Mhm.
And like I said, I think that's a huge thing for me is don't talk down to kids. Talk to them as if they are
Mhm.
adults, and I think they respect you more for it too.
Mhm.
I've found that, at least in my own experience. So
Thank
Yeah.
goodness for the
yeah.
teachers that
Oh
slipped in.
yeah. Yeah.
For the really good teachers that slipped into our system.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Like you,
Yeah.
Zara.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
you have to realize that most of the teachers are just as indoctrinated, as everybody else, and they're not, in my experience, the most imaginative bunch, really, because the creativity is dampened by that system. But I think you're spot on there, Sean. That's really amazing. It's great to hear, and I think more and more people are moving towards this. They're just sensing that the system isn't working for their kids. They can see it. I don't know about how it is in the States right now, but it sounds very similar to here. Even though the school system here is a lot gentler, I would say, and there's none of this multiple choice testing stuff happening.
That's good.
But the mental health of the youth here is just horrible. They're self-harming and just
Yes.
wanting and
Here as
dropping
well.
out, and it's just absolutely
Medicated. The children here are
Hmm.
medicated, and it's so
that's still
challenging.
happening. Eh?
Oh, even more so now. I think parents are just looking for any kind of solution, not realizing that they have it. Like they
Mhm.
have what their children need, and it's connection, and it's
Mhm.
just genuine,
Mhm.
listening, talking,
Mhm.
just being there, being present. But parents are
Mhm.
going through a difficult time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just this one system that feeds into the other. But I really think people can benefit from your help, Zahra, and can benefit from what you're doing and the certification process that you have. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's one other piece as well that's as important as connection with each other, and that is nature. Right?
Yes.
We have to get the kids out in nature. For me, honestly, until kids actually come up to us and say, I want to start learning X, Y, and Z, the only thing they need to be doing is playing with each other and being in nature, right? Just, you learn so much more. And I read The Ringing Cedars of Russia. You ever read those books? No? They're worth reading. But there was a piece in there about artificial and natural objects, right? And an artificial object, for example, would be a wooden puzzle piece shaped like a butterfly. Yeah. Take that and give it to a kid. What's the kid going to do? The baby going to do? Going to pick it up, put it in its mouth, right? And then they'll look at it for a minute and throw it down, right? How often do you see kids pick up all these objects and then for 2 seconds and then throw it down and that's it? They're done with it, right? But when you actually, if you put a child in front of a butterfly, an actual butterfly, with all of the information that butterfly is carrying, right? A child can watch that for a long, long time and be completely fascinated because it's right. And that actually helps them to develop their intelligence because it's taking in, again, more information, creating more construct and helping them learn to think faster. Whereas all these artificial things, that wooden thing gets thrown down because it's learned everything there is to learn about it in those few seconds. Oh, it's hard. It tastes like that. Okay, it's that shape. There's nothing else there. Right? So the more time they spend in nature, the smarter they are. And I know parents are going to love to hear that.
That's awesome. That's a great little tidbit too, Zahra. Thank you so much. Well, this has been enlightening. I love these conversations because it's mind expansive, right? Like I learned something from talking to you today. I learned something from Sean. Like I think that the more we have these kinds of conversations, the more we can expand and grow and just be connected more to one another. So, and here you are in New Zealand. Sean's in New York. I'm in Houston.
Oh, you're in New York. I assumed you were in Houston. All right, cool.
Yeah, I'm in Long Island. Yep.
In Long Island. So
sorry,
Long
Island.
Long Island.
Long Island.
Nice.
Have you been to New York, Zahra?
Yeah, I've actually been to Long Island. The Alternative Education Resource Organization, AERO, had their conference there a couple of years.
Very cool.
Wow, fascinating. I didn't know that. That is awesome. I truly believe these resources are all around us. We just don't know where to find them. So if people need to get in touch with you, Zahra, can they reach you through your website?
Yeah, they can just reach me through my website. And then, of course, these days it doesn't matter about phone numbers and stuff, right? We can just use WhatsApp and so on.
And social media. Are you on Facebook?
I am on Facebook,
Okay, excellent.
And so far, there's still only one Zahra Lightway, so it's quite easy to find.
I can't imagine there being too many names like that. Yes.
No, not so far.
I love it. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Zahra. I learned so much, and it's always
thanks so much, Zahra. That was great.
Yeah,
thank you for having me. I love impossible conversations.
Don't we all?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Sean, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for anything. Thanks, Zahra. Yeah, it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Awesome. We'll see you all next time. Please tune in. Like us on Facebook. I got to put that little plug in there. Like us on Facebook, and we're on Spotify. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn. We're all over the place. So you're going to watch us.
We're probably on it.
Thanks so much, guys.